Subliminal messaging techniques have been around in popular media since the advent of radio, when advertisers attempted to promote brand loyalty by playing specific tunes or series of sounds in their advertisement. Though subliminal messaging never garnered any significant business, when television came around, attempts to communicate secret messages or override the free will of a viewer went into overdrive. Never supported by any serious science, it was long thought that series of colors, sounds, or rapidly flashed messages that lasted for mere frames may have a lasting impact on the human brain. While none of these efforts yielded any significant results, it hasn't stopped governments, corporations, or police departments from trying. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're taking a look at some weird and some cool subliminal messages aired on TV. 8. BTK Killer. On January 15, 1974, Joseph Otero was subdued in his Wichita, Kansas home and suffocated with a plastic bag. His wife, Julie Otero, was then strangled with a rope. Using another plastic bag, the killer then suffocated 9-year-old Joseph Otero Jr. and then hung his 11-year-old sister Josephine Otero from a drain pipe with a rope. The police found no leads, and months later on April 4th, a 21-year-old woman was found stabbed 11 times. For years, the police searched for a killer with no leads, while the killer taunted police by sending letters describing his murders to the media or by leaving them in books at the public library. In 1978, a local Wichita station, KAKE-TV, ran a report on what was then known as the Blind Torture Kill Killer, or BTK Killer. And in an effort to get the killer to turn himself in, the report included a subliminal message saying, "Now call the chief," as well as a pair of glasses. In the midst of an interview, for just a few frames, a white screen appeared with the words "Now call the chief" written in the upper left corner along with the glasses. The glasses were included because when the killer had murdered his most recent victim, Nancy Fox, there were a pair of glasses left on her dresser, and the police thought seeing the glasses might stir remorse in the killer. The ploy was unsurprisingly not successful, and the BTK killer wouldn't be caught until inadvertently giving himself up in 2005. 7. Mr. Echo Lost. The television series Lost is famed for being full of twisting turns and, well, giant plot holes that barely resolved. However, mystery abounded across its 6 seasons, and the show's creators loved to tease the audience by dropping barely noticeable hints in unexpected places. In the second season of the show, audiences were introduced to Mr. Echo, a violent Nigerian gorilla turned Catholic priest. Despite his character arc developing over the course of many episodes, unbeknownst to most viewers, his entire backstory was plainly visible all along. Carrying a big stick, Mr. Echo had carved several biblical passages onto it, and it's only explained by another character as something he did because he's a priest. Yet, the show's writers were clearly asking the audience to look closer, and those that did discovered the real significance. The passages written on Mr. Echo's stick tell the story of his life before arriving at the island and his ultimate demise. Starting with Titus 3, which tells of sinners living in malice and envy but finding salvation in God, we discover Mr. Echo's violent past. Next is Acts 4 through 12, a nod at Mr. Echo's not quite authority as a priest. Finally, Echo's stick also contains Psalm 23. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." The passage clearly referencing Mr. Echo's fatal confrontation with the shadowy smoke monster that would kill him. 6. God, The Simpsons. First airing on December 18, 1989, The Simpsons had run for nearly 3 decades, yet the show got its start in very humble beginnings. On April 19, 1987, the first iteration of the show ran on The Tracy Ullman Show as a series of short sketches, and given their popularity after 3 years, the sketch was developed into a half-hour primetime show, becoming Fox's first series to land in the top 30 ratings in a season. The rest is television history. However, throughout the course of the show, one of the things that continuously stands out, other than Marge's hair, is the 4 fingers and 4 toes of each character. While technically this is because it makes hands easier to animate, the show hinted at something else entirely. When in the episode Homer the Heretic, Homer comes face to face with God, and sharp-eyed viewers quickly spotted that God had 5 fingers and even had 5 toes. What this says about the show has been hotly debated since, with some viewers simply claiming that it was a subtle joke to the audience, and others saying that God represents the Simpsons' true animators and is crossing over from our five-fingered world into the Simpsons world. 5. Sansa Stark, Game of Thrones. Subliminal is not what most people would use to describe Game of Thrones and its over-the-top brutality. Amidst a show full of decapitations, rapes, and more murders in one episode than some cop shows have in a season, Game of Thrones still manages to weave some ingenious subliminal messages into the background, or in some cases, the very foreground of scenes. Costume designer Michelle Clapton has long been manipulating the design of the characters' costumes to hint at backstories, predict the future, or comment on the present of each character. For example, Daenerys' signature blue dress contains shimmering dragon-like blue scales on one portion, an obvious nod to her status as Mother of Dragons. However, it's in the episode where Sansa Stark is married that she created her masterwork. As Sansa is being married into House Lannister, she is wearing a dress that depicts a direwolf, the sigil of her house, House Stark, being wrapped up and dominated by a lion, sigil for House Lannister, exactly as is happening within the show's politics. Going even deeper, however, the colors of the dress hint at various families and tell Sansa's story. The red weavings amongst the dress depict the growing influence of the Lannisters on Sansa, mirroring the way her character is becoming more and more like the infamous manipulative blonde-headed lords and ladies. 4. Bad News, How I Met Your Mother. Heralding back to the days of trying to manipulate people by flashing numbers or colors at them in rapid succession, How I Met Your Mother used a clever subliminal messaging tactic to build anxiety and dread in its viewers. In the episode Bad News, the audience expects that at any point shockingly bad news could break. Yet sharp-eyed viewers noticed a trend of descending numbers appearing in every scene. Starting at 50, every scene included a prominently featured number somewhere in the scene that started a countdown from 50 to 1. A character drinks a beer with a 48 on it. A book contains the number 40 in the title. A character turns to a calendar on the 21st day of the month. For the sharp-eyed viewers who spotted the countdown, they realized that the awful news they had been waiting to hear was approaching closer and closer, until finally at last the countdown reaches 1 at the end of the episode, and we discover that one of the major characters' father has died. 3. Marlboro Barcode. After public outcry over cigarette advertisement targeting children, cigarette brands found themselves unable to advertise on television anymore. To get around the ban on creating commercials, cigarette brands moved to endorsing professional sports, though that too would ultimately lead to a ban on endorsements except for Formula One, where cigarette brand logos covered nearly every race car from top to bottom. After outcry from many professional sporting organizations and regulatory bodies, a ban was eventually passed and no longer could cigarette brand logos appear on race cars. To get around the ban, however, Marlboro came up with a very clever tactic. Instead of displaying their well-recognized logo, they used a barcode-style design painted on the side of a Formula One car that was bereft of any lettering or much detail. Yet as the car zoomed around the track and was broadcast on television, the motion blur effect created an image that was eerily similar to the Marlboro brand logo. Quickly catching on, the European Public Health Commission applied pressure to European lawmakers, who ruled that the design was too close to the banned Marlboro logo. Marlboro would go on to plead innocence, claiming that the design was meant to be neutral and not linked to the sale of tobacco products, because if you can trust anyone, it's definitely cigarette companies. 2. McDonald's Food Network. First airing on March 5, 2005, Iron Chef America quickly became one of the world's most popular shows and a prime revenue generator for the Food Network where it was hosted. With millions of fans watching chefs battle it out over delicious dinners, some sharp-eyed viewers noticed something strange in one episode. At one point in the middle of an episode, the McDonald's logo was flashed onto the screen for a few fractions of a second, not long enough for most to notice, but hopefully long enough to make viewers hungry for some McDonald's. Both the Food Network and McDonald's denied that they had colluded on a subliminal ad campaign, saying that it was a technical error and nothing more. 1. Comedy Central, UK. Back in 2013, a particularly eagle-eyed viewer was watching Comedy Central at his home in Britain when, during a commercial break for Mr. Bean, he noticed a weird flash that briefly appeared on the screen. Luckily, the viewer had been running his DVR at the time, and after rewinding back and forth and going over frame by frame, he discovered a huge block of text that appeared for mere fractions of a second on his screen. Even more strange, the block of text seemed to be an ode of sorts to a record store named HMV, located somewhere called High Street. The giant block of text which filled the screen tells about a shared experience of visiting the record store with your tribe, and laments the loss of these experiences, asking at the end, "You can't fight progress, can you?" The block of text also had several words highlighted, though put together they seemed to have no special meaning. After posting his discovery to Reddit, some forum members commented that the message may be part of a modern-day numbers station broadcast, an updated version of radio broadcasts made up of random bits of dialogue, poetry, or series of numbers that were coded messages to undercover spies. Whatever its origin, it was discovered that this happened before on the same station in the UK, with different messages, each replete with highlighted words. Does subliminal messaging work to advertise a product? Ever feel strange cravings for McDonald's after watching the Food Network? Have you spotted any cool details in the backgrounds of your favorite shows? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Why You Don't Want to Win the Lottery. Thanks for watching, and as always, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.